Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the 8th offering of the Solve the Next Economy Forum. I'm actually going to start off by saying I'm a little bit bummed. I missed out on a dance session. For those of you who joined us early, some of my fellow hosts were jamming out to a Prince song, and everyone was going crazy, and it was an amazing way to start off the day. I'm bummed I missed that party. I was off to the side doing some sun salutations, which is good, but jamming out to Prince would be a little bit better. Anyways, welcome back if you join us for days 1 and 2. My name is Philip Lozano, and I join you from Classroom Anita PC here on site at Momentum. And for those of you who remember from yesterday, you'll know that Anita PC is a Blackfoot word for spiderweb. And the creator wrapped the world in its web, and that if there is a vibration anywhere on that web that signals trouble, the creator will come and help. Humans were told to follow that example. And so all of you are here today. All the businesses, organizations, and community champions are part of that web. I think it's a beautiful metaphor for community, connected and supportive. And so we respect those who came before us and acknowledge that we operate on Treaty 7 land, home to the Kainai, Piikani, Siksika, Tsuut'ina, Stoney Nakoda, and Métis Nation Region 3. My fellow co-MC from the past couple of days, Niketi, summarized the first day beautifully, speaking about not just the moral and social imperative, but the economic imperative for inclusion and diversity. One of my fellow planning committee members, Joni, summarized yesterday's session on unlearning and relearning as it's not a cognitive process. Our brains don't like change, so they tend to resist information that suggests we need to do things in new ways. The way to overcome this resistance is not through the mind, but with emotions. It's called effective influence. Simply put, it means we need to change hearts before we can change minds. And so hopefully that will be taking place today as well, bringing our hearts into this conversation. So thank you for choosing to be part of this courageous engagement and conversation, because we're experiencing a world that's been turned upside down. And so through our engagement process, a common theme, while we were engaging with partners trying to come up with the themes for each of these days, a common theme that was coming up was this new normal. And so it became our theme together to begin this process of creating a new normal. And as we engage in these generative conversations, they call on us to show up, to be present, and to bring our whole selves. Part of that includes being vulnerable. And in the spirit of being vulnerable, I'm going to own it and just kind of put it out there that we had some hiccups yesterday with the technology piece. Some sessions started a bit late, some breakout rooms were empty, some people just got booted out of Zoom. So it was kind of fitting that Janet's presentation yesterday was talking about constantly learning. And so we as hosts, we too are learning on how to put on an online gathering because we've never done this before. So I'm hoping we've worked these kinks out. There might be a couple more coming up today. So thanks for just kind of rolling with the punches and keeping up with us. We appreciate you pivoting, adapting, and learning with us. As you'll have noticed, we have 5 themes or 5 sub-themes, one for each day. Today, we're focusing on building safe and benefit-driven supply chains. We hope that you're able to stay and engage with us, not just today, but for the rest of the week. And so we'll be hanging out Wednesday, Thursday, Friday morning. And so before we kind of kick things off, I got to do a big thank you to the sponsors that made this all possible. We've got our associate sponsors, Chandos, Connect First, Suncor, our patron sponsor, Service. Please be sure to connect with them and check out their exhibits, along with other sponsors in the exhibits tab above. So we're all hanging out on Swapcard. There's a lot of really cool functionality. Be sure to message each other, see if people have messaged you with that little chat bubble, but also check out all of the booths in the exhibit section. Some really amazing organizations there. And so a couple housekeeping items before we get rocking and rolling. We want to make sure that we all have a great experience with this virtual conference. And so again, we had some challenges yesterday, but don't forget, if you're ever lost, think of Swapcard as the lobby to the hotel. If we're having like an on-site conference, if you don't know where you need to be, just go back to the lobby, which means come back to Swapcard, and you can always just click on the live watch now button along the top, or you can click on the agenda to find where people are at. There's also some notifications. Anyways, there's lots of places. If you accidentally shut down your window, lots of options you can go to. You can check out like the diagram with the circled portions that you can click on as well. We also have some optional training sessions that take place 8 a.m. every morning, so crash that if you want to check it out and learn more. And then how to connect, tips and tricks, best to use Chrome, read all these other things if that's of interest to you. And then let's jump into how we can engage during the forum. Some of you have already popped on the discussion box, which is on the right. So let's actually just take a brief moment. If everyone could just introduce yourself and let us know one of your favorite moments from the forum so far, or if it's your first day with us, what you're most excited about today or one of the upcoming days. So maybe we'll just take a quick second to type that in the chat. And while you're all doing that, again, a reminder to connect with others, go to the attendees tab, see the amazing people that are part of the forum. We have over 95 guest speakers and experts, and they're as easy to connect as just clicking on their name. You have access to their LinkedIn. It's a beautiful thing, this technology. You can also have messages and video calls to make networking way easier than even in person. And lastly, it's so easy to multitask. I get it. I've been there myself. I was FaceTiming with my mom. In the background, I had some YouTube videos going on, all while cracking some jokes on WhatsApp. Am I present for all of these things? Sure. But am I fully present? Definitely not. And so I challenge all of you to be fully present so that we can bring our whole selves, all of the wisdom, the love, and magic that you hold within you to each and every one of our conversations today. And so with that, throughout the week, do what you need to do to stay engaged. Don't forget to stand up, stretch, look away from the screen, give your eyes a break. If you need to go to the bathroom, go to the bathroom. Again, another one of the great joys of being online. If you just need to leave, leave. Come back when you're ready to go. And so as we get ready for our courageous conversations, we need to reflect and ground ourselves each day by feeding our soul. And so with that note, I have the great pleasure of being joined by none other than Bob Chartier, amazing Inglewood champion, singer, songwriter, voice discoverer at the young age of 60, community champion, leadership developer, and songwriter of over 100 songs. Bob, how are you doing this morning, my friend?
Hey, Phil, nice to see you. Feel the thrill. I'm doing just fine, thanks. And just, again, really happy to be here and to imagine all these people that are joining the Soul of the New Economy Forum again this year, to imagine how we can work and work together in a better way. And actually, this morning I would love to sing a song that one of the sub themes I think is going about today is the whole notion of the space that we live in, the space we live in, the space we work in, and the globe, though the space that we live in, and with the rest of the world. And I think we've never been more cognizant of that we're living in a big world. Never before in my lifetime, in any of our lifetimes, have we had something happen to the world, not to a country, not to a town, but it happened to the world. And so in a big way this week, I think that's part of it. Let me sing this song, Phil.
Please.
It's one of the first songs I wrote, and I grew up in a very religious, home, but it didn't make sense to me, conventional religion, and so as the song came to me as a notion of the big thing with religion is cathedrals and churches. That's where the space is for spirit and soul, is in church. And I'm going, no, I don't think so. I found my soul in really interesting other places. I'm listening to Amy Bishop singing in the Ironwood, and I feel like I'm in church, and I've been in a ballpark, and I feel like I'm in some kind of church. So this song's called Cathedral. If I needed to pray, I would leave this old town. If I had something to say, to get up from this down, I'd offer a prayer, perhaps a small toast, a cathedral we share, meadowlarks, fence posts. If I needed a sing, I would head on downtown with nothing to bring but my homegrown sound. I'd raise up my voice for the 12-bar anoint, sanctuary of choice, neighborhood juke joint. If I needed a praise, I would opt for the bleachers on hot summer days with the season's believers, with a beer and a dog, a shot over the wall, gonna lift off the fog, the temple of the long ball. If I needed some refuge and a place to unwind, with the world in a deluge from the tough daily grind, put aside all my rage and release all that steam, make a sweet pilgrimage, blessed church of trout streams. If I needed a prayer, I would leave this old town. If I had something to say, to get up from this down, I'd offer a prayer, perhaps a small toast, a cathedral we share, a meadowlark's fence post.
It's beautiful, Bob.
Well, thank you, Phil.
It's
I've been just reflecting, last night and this morning about what you're going to talk about today, and I'm something just really simple. Your workplace could be a sacred space, could be a soulful place, and a lot of the workplaces that I spent years in were industrial. Like the walls were just gray, and there wasn't anything in there that moved me other than go to work in this kind of efficient space. And then I went to work. I did some work with my friend Bonnie at the Child Advocacy Center here in Calgary, where kids that are in really traumatic situations. First thing she did, the first day on the job, she went to a school district and got a whole bunch of kids' paintings and created a whole children's art gallery right in the middle of the workspace.
sweet.
I think what we should be when we look at our space, let's take charge of it. Let's make it a soulful space. Bring in some plants. Create a space in the corner, somewhere where people can, somebody can bring in a Nigerian sculpture and go, look at that. Isn't that interesting, right? Isn't that great? Talk about diversity, but we don't bring stuff into our space that inspires us, right? So there's just so many. Sometimes people put a radio on in our workspace, and it's, I don't know, some kind of pop streaming thing or whatever, right? Which is okay, but why aren't we playing like CKUA and local musicians and celebrating all the musicians that live in Calgary and Alberta? So I think there's a even more ways than I've acknowledged here, but I think it's really important to create really soulful spaces that we spend 8 hours a day in. What do you think, Phil?
100% agree with you. And I think there couldn't be a better way to kick off the day. So, Bob, thank you for your beautiful voice. Thank you for joining us, and looking forward to the next 2 days of listening to you in song.
Well, thank you again for the opportunity to be with these fine folks, and just a message out to everybody. This is a great way to spend this week. It's a hard week out there, and you are together, you're connecting, and you're having incredible conversations about what we need to talk about these days.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. And so, joining me on screen right now, I have none other than Leo Rothschild, not Rothschild. Big difference. Just make that no H in the name. He is of Canadian. He's from the Canadian Business for Social Responsibility, who's joining us as co-MC for today. It's great to work with Leo. We've crossed paths a dozen or so times over the years, and it's typically actually at community gatherings, aka house parties. Just saying that just makes me long for the days that we could connect and be in each other's companies, in each other's homes. But we all need to do our parts, stay safe, stay home. And then we've also crossed paths at Folk Fest. I've heard him speak about sustainability at the University of Calgary, promoting doing business like a Canadian, or we'll cross paths on the bike paths while riding our bikes. And so, Leo, it's great to be joined with you today.
Thank you.
Awesome. And so before I hand things over to Lyra completely, I would love to welcome Elder Wallace into the room. Elder Wallace, how are you doing? Oh, we've got
beautiful day. Thanks for asking. It feels very nice to be part of this group this morning. I think we got some beautiful minds gathered together here in one area, and it makes me very honored to be part of that. Hey, be good. I just like to say a couple of things here before I get started with the prayer and the prayer song that I have planned to do before we get started with everything. A blessing for all that we're trying to do here today and for the rest of the week. I just like to mention that from our perspective, from the native side of things, we are land thinkers, as we call them. Everything natural. We work with all living things. We have a word for that in my language. We say. And that means all my relatives, all my relations. So everything that lives, rocks, insects, elephants, everything, we're all related someplace, somehow, some way. Creator made that connection for us, which is great, because that tells us that we have to respect each and every living thing on this planet and in the universe, as a matter of fact, too. When we do our prayers, we like to include our Creator, because him and his helpers are in the next realm, or the next area that we go to when we leave this earth. So we acknowledge all the time, every time we do prayers and that our Creator is the one that looks after everything on this earth. Today I like to mention that every speaker that spoke so far has got their own way of saying things or bringing things forth, and it's all beautiful. It really hits my heart to hear some of the good things that are said here. And hopefully, this kind of conversations and and meetings will continue. We need to all get into the same bird's nest, so to speak, where we can all live as human beings without prejudice, racist stuff like that. This is what I'm praying and hoping for, and probably never happen in my time, but for the future, I'm going to be praying and helping our young people to understand what it is that we're trying to accomplish in these kind of forums. We have lots of young minds out there, and we have to help culture them as we go through. And it doesn't matter which culture it is. We need to get together, work on a parallel basis, so to speak, side by side, so that our future is improved. We look after our Mother Earth. We look after each other. Those types of things. This is the only way that we're going to be able to function in the future. And things, that we used to read in comic books years ago seem to be coming true. I don't know if anybody's ever read comic books, but there was some far-fetched things in our minds at that point in time where we thought, I don't know, it never entered my mind about what was being printed there. But now that I look back and see these things that they were thinking about, they must have had futuristic people that were working with this kind of stuff. Anyways, it's coming true. Everything is coming true, and it's beautiful. I always look forward to the future. We need to do that. And Creator gave us this world to live in, and it's such a beautiful place. And then what we need to do is we need to get together and live as human beings. It doesn't matter what culture, what color, what race we are. Just let's do it. Let's just get it done. Because if we're going to survive, this is what we're going to do. That's my little spiel for today. I thank you for listening. I'm going to say the blessing now and a prayer song, and we'll carry on from there. Ni misho miss. Inanishka kanagritu yana kanagigo ni misho. Thank you, Creator, for sitting with us, looking after us. We are small beings in a vast sea of sand. You can't even see us, but we're there. You created us, Creator. Thank you for giving us a chance to experience life on this earth. Thank you for looking after our people. Thank you for looking after each and every one of us and all the families. I want to ask a small favor, Creator, that you watch over each and every one of us, all our families, our people. Doesn't matter which culture. We're all the same. We ask that you look after each and every one of us. Give us a chance to prove ourselves on this earth, so that we can get together and make things happen in a positive manner. Thank you for listening. We ask that you bless everybody today. Blessing for all the world. Blessing to yourselves and your helpers. I thank you for that. I want to sing a very short prayer song. And as I said before, that when I sing this song, it's a prayer song, for ourselves as individuals, and we go within ourselves and be thankful for everything positive that happens to us in the world. The negative looks after itself, but the future, the positive stuff is very hard to do. So look into that and give yourself a tap on the back when I finish my song, and then we'll carry on with our meeting. So, which shouldn't go in the going on, man. Bonito emotion, bonito bagan high, 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 I know, hey, I know, I Thank you for coming to sit with us. Thank you for watching over us. Ask a blessing for everybody today in Mishomis. God knows how to do it all, Creator. Thank you for looking after us. Let's carry on and do the meeting. Thank you for listening.
That was incredible, Elder Wallace. Thank you. And I see Elder Florence sneaked in the middle. Hello.
Yes. She's got to take our kids. We're still looking after kids, so she got to take them to the bus, and she's a little bit late coming back.
Oh, good. Elder Florence, did you maybe want to do a quick shout out to everyone listening quickly, or did you want to say anything?
And I'm always better half.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything, and I look after our 2 grandchildren. I've been looking after them since birth. So, we're, parents all over again, and we're also grandparents and elders of the community. So I'm very blessed and happy to be here. I am happy to see others out there, and really, I'm very pleased to be accepted into this group. And I'm sorry I can't come to all of it. Like I can't appear for all of the sessions, but at least I get to see a bit. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, both of you, for joining us. I feel so grounded and ready to take on the day. That was so beautiful. Thank you again. And with that, Leo, I hand things over to you, my friend.
Well, I appreciate that, Phil. You're leaving some big shoes to fill, and let me also thank Elders Wallace and Florence. You've honored us so much, and we're so fortunate to have your presence this morning and throughout the week. Please stay with us as much as possible because your participation in this community is important. And just reflecting a little bit about the prayer that you talked about. Well, first, before your prayer, you're talking about comic books, reading comic books as a kid. It makes me. I'm a big comic book geek myself, so I've often thought about this: what superpower I would want to have if I was a superhero, and time travel would be the one that I would choose. And how blessed are all of us here to have the time to connect with a community that is talking about important things like putting a soul and putting the most important things in our lives, in the world, into the very heart of the way our economy functions. That's really what we're talking about here. And so what a luxury of time that we have to be able to participate in this kind of event. And it's wonderful to have you all. But the other reflection of something that you said, Elder Wallace, is that you talked about the idea of the creator looking over us, watching over us. And I think that right now in this time of COVID-19, when so many people are feeling so alone and so isolated, I think that it's really important to remember that we are all part of the community here, that it is an important role that we all share to look after one another, to check on each other. Sending a simple text message to ask how somebody's doing is really an important thing. It's not just another thing on your to-do list. It is something that builds connection and belonging. So just wanted to mention that. I haven't really introduced myself. My name is Lior. I'm the Executive Director of Canadian Business for Social Responsibility, as Phil the Thrill mentioned earlier. And you may not know about CBSR, and I just wanted to let you know that for the past 25 years, this organization has convened a national community of sustainability and corporate responsibility leaders from different sectors across Canada to explore best practices and emerging solutions to broad social and environmental challenges. And CBSR provides insight, advice, webinars, and a national communications platform to reach influential leaders, investors, and public policy makers. I love the Soul Forum. I've attended several of these events, and I'm so thankful to be invited back and to play a meaningful role in this year's event and explore with you all how we can reform our economy to be more inclusive, sustainable, and purpose-driven. Today, we're doing a deep dive into building safe and benefit-driven supply chains. This exploration will take us into leadership success stories, challenges, and lessons learned from those that specialize in sustainable supply chains and social procurement in the public and private sector. Let's keep in our minds the big questions. How does concern for all stakeholders along the supply chain become part of the soul of a company? How can individuals and organizations use their purchasing power to change lives, protect the environment, and invest in the future that we want? I've been working in sustainability and social responsibility for my entire career, and I keep coming back to supply chain management as one of the most important areas for change management. And that's because no matter what the product or service, someone on the back end needed to procure the raw materials, purchase the equipment, contract the distributors, secure the office space, which itself comes with sourcing furniture, flooring, cleaning services, and so much more. Some organizations, in fact, outsource major parts of their business to third parties. That was very common during my time in the oil and gas sector. And corporate policies and employee training programs that we hear so much about that support diversity, inclusion, and a small carbon footprint are great. But do those aspirations get passed on to contractors, subcontractors, subcontractors, and the rest of the global supply chain that go into the products and services that we consume on a regular basis? That's what today is all about. That's what our speakers are here to help us unpack. And I'm pleased to tell you that we've got an amazing morning broken into 4 parts. Thank you for putting up the slide there, Donna. These parts you can see are sort of like, think of it as kind of like 4 acts in a play. We've got a keynote speech that's just terrific. You're gonna love that. Followed by roundtables, a keynote panel, and concurrent breakout sessions. We'll begin with a keynote with the Executive Director of International Justice Mission Canada, or IJM. And after the keynote, we have 5 roundtable sessions. Each roundtable session will spotlight a company or industry and their corporate supply chain practices. And you'll have a chance to attend 2 of those. Then we'll come back here for a keynote presentation on Indigenous inclusion and beyond. And then finally, there will be 3 breakout sessions about collaborating with government, industry focus on supply chains, and sustainable procurement. Got all that? I know I've just thrown a lot of information at you. If you have any questions at all, please throw them in the chat box. And there's a few folks that would be happy to answer your question. And like Phil said earlier, when in doubt, return back to this platform that you're on right now, and that's where you'll be able to see where you can go next and all the different options. Okay. So if you get knocked off of Zoom or any other platform during the breakouts, just return back to the swap card platform, and you can get oriented again. So on that housekeeping note, I'd like to switch gears towards the first act in our morning, and I get the distinct honor of introducing you to our first keynote presentation entitled "Do No Harm." Who is at the other end of our buying and procurement decisions? And this presentation will be delivered by the Executive Director of IJM. We're fortunate to hear from someone who has an extensive amount of experience working on the ground to make international supply chains safer and actually freeing people from slavery. After the Executive Director speaks, IJM's Local Development Director, Phil Calvert, who I had a chance to connect with this morning, such a great guy, will join us to answer some questions. So we're lucky to have Phil here as well. So feel free to post your questions in the chat for Phil throughout a news presentation, but especially after the presentation. And I know he'll be happy to see and respond to your questions. But first, let's welcome Anu George Kajananthapil.
Greetings. My name is Anu George Kanjanathopil, and I'm the Executive Director of IJM Canada. IJM stands for International Justice Mission. I live in Mississauga with my husband and twin daughters. I worked for IJM for 9 years in the Delhi office as well as the Chennai office, and 2 years ago relocated to Canada, and it has been an incredible journey. It is an honor to be with you today, and I'm forever grateful for my friend Angie Redcoop for the invitation to share. Before I get into what I would love to talk to you about, may I just ask you a question? Have you ever been attacked? I rephrase. Have you ever been attacked brutally for seeking justice when you least expect it, when you have been overpowered by a much stronger, angrier, and an inhuman person or persons just because you got in their way? I have. And this is when I, for the first time in my life, was faced with a shocking reality that led me to question the basic assumptions that I didn't even know that I had. In that moment, 2 worlds collided for me. The one I knew and took for granted, and the one I was confronted with that hellacious night. Up until this point, I would say I had a pretty normal experience and a normal life that most people could identify with. I have 2 loving parents, went to good schools, and was fairly successful at the things that I engaged in. And my idea of a great weekend would be hanging out with my brothers, my friends, family, acting in theater, reading, or just doing everything else that normal people would do. What happened to me in that alley began a journey that continuously taught me that the easy life that I once lived was only easy if I was able to operate with a baseline assumption of relative safety and security that is afforded to me by a functioning public justice system. I repeat, a baseline assumption of relative safety and security that is afforded to me by a functioning public justice system. For over half the world, 4 billion people, there is no baseline assumption of safety and security that you can have, because it simply is not true. If someone were to ask me all those years ago where the batteries in my TV remote came from, or if I'd considered how the shrimp in last night's dinner got on my plate, I wouldn't have the foggiest idea what that person was talking about. Who cares? I sure didn't. In hindsight, I now look back to the moment I was attacked and see how it changed the trajectory of my story, of what my life could or would be about. When this moment happened, it hit me like a load of bricks on my shoulders. An unexplainable weight that I couldn't figure what to do with. There was no box that I could file that image into. I had no experience or knowledge to draw on to help process what I had just experienced. I was just laying on the ground, staring, heart beating, panicking, questioning, and asking myself, what do I do now? That moment of violence is what eventually led me to working with IGN. I have played a role in rescuing over 10,000 people trapped in the throes of slavery, experiencing their own hellacious treatment. But many of these cases were intertwined with supply chains. For example, there was a rescue in a textile mill that I was part of. We had information that girls were trapped, and when our investigators got there, the owner had been tipped off, and he had created the situation where it seemed like a normal, fully functional working facility. So when my team went in, everyone pretended that things were perfect. But I saw that one girl was making eye contact because she eagerly wanted to say something. So I went in and spoke to her in her mother tongue. I mean, not the language easily understood by the slave masters there. She said she needed help. So we rounded them up. There were close to 100 girls trapped in tiny rooms being sexually abused and forced to work unearthly hours. They were told that if they worked for 2 years, they would have enough money for their marriage. This system is called the Sumangali system. And in India, the custom is that you need to have enough money saved up for marriage. So this was the way the girls were securing their future. Some of those girls had been there for 7 years with no money given to them. They were just trapped. Once the slave master knew we would rescue them, he locked the gates of the textile mill and threatened both the girls and us. Nobody stepped in between to support us. There was even a mob attack, and we had to contact the Prime Minister's office to get help and support. All of the goods made in the textile mills were sent to either Canada, US, UK. Those were the key importers. So the clothes that were imported from that textile mill were not only made by the hands of people who were enslaved, they were made by hands of girls who were sexually exploited day in and day out. Almost 111 girls tortured for your shirt. We eventually did rescue every one of those girls, but it all came with a cost. You see, here it is again. I was operating on an assumption of safety and security, which stood in stark contrast to the girls right in front of me, whose life and story was shaped by the opposite, a lack of safety and security. My colleagues and I at International Justice Mission can tell you story after story, some like these, and some much harder. The common thread, however, is that people are being abused through slavery or other forms of violence, reduced to commodities to make profit for their owners. Two worlds. Two worlds are collided in me. The one I knew and took for granted, and the one I was confronted with. Today, there are 40 million people trapped in slavery, and that is more than any other time in history. Let that sink in for a moment. That is more than the population of Canada. The question I want to propose for all of us is to ask ourselves today, do my baseline assumptions provide a collision point for the experience of people around the world who can't operate on those same set of assumptions? Let me explain. I mentioned shrimp earlier. Until a few years ago, it had never occurred to me to think through what it takes for that small shrimp to get on my plate. I mean, I knew they had to be caught or farmed somehow, somewhere in the world. But the depth of the thinking I had around it was, being in a landlocked area of the world, it is amazing that I can even enjoy this kind of food. That's pretty incredible, right? I mean, have we ever paused to think and look closely at what it takes from a human impact point of view? Shrimp. And that's just one item. In 2017, in the month of January, a study prepared by the ISARA Institute, an International Justice Mission, supported by the Walmart Foundation, it took a deep look into the Thai fishing industry. The study is called Not in the Same Boat. The findings were incredibly surprising. And I would encourage you to take a look at that on the website, igm.org/Thai-fishing study. Thailand is the world's third largest exporter of seafood. In 2014, the exports equated to 6.7 billion US dollars. That is roughly 8.7 billion Canadian dollars. This industry employs at least 175,000 workers, 82% of whom are migrant workers. And this study took a look specifically at Burmese and Cambodian fishermen. 74.2 of them are reported working for at least 16 hours a day. And of them, only 11% received more than 9,000 baht. That's the legal minimum wage per month. In fact, the average pay was reported to be roughly 6,000 baht a month. And that roughly translates as $7 a day. One story in particular highlights a fisherman who was promised $157 a month to be paid every 6 months. A year after he started, he had to leave because he became way too ill to work anymore. This was when he received his first and only payment of $250. When he questioned it, he was told that they had lost the records of his work and more or less to take it or leave it. 76% of fishermen interviewed had been in debt bondage. At least 38% trafficked, possibly up to over 80%. And it forces me to bring my two worlds together again. Two worlds colliding. The wonder of tasty shrimp on my plate and the reality of the kind of labor practices that have been allowed to happen with almost complete impunity. Exploiting workers and subjecting many of them to extreme physical violence, sometimes held in cages on vessels while the captain holds their passports so that they can't escape. Can you imagine? Being held in a cage on a ship so that when the time comes, they can go back and get that fish so that it can land on my plate. And this is an example of slavery. And I'm compelled to ask myself the question, has my assumption of what I see as a luxury item that I get to enjoy been a source of profound suffering for someone else? Let's take a look at another example. I'm looking for my phone here. The way I use consumer electronics is another baseline assumption that I have. If I need to find something out, just pull out my phone and look it up. Need to check the time and the number of steps I've taken, glance at the watch on my wrist. Those batteries in the video game controller I mentioned earlier. Again, have we ever taken the time to ask what it takes behind the scenes to make life so convenient? Well, the lithium-ion batteries in many of these electronic items requires cobalt, the majority of which comes from the Democratic Republic of Congo. This is widely known, and the World Economic Forum's Global Battery Alliance has launched its guiding principles towards a sustainable value chain in the area. While this is a good step, I would encourage you to take a look at the slide that Anna, my colleague, has put up. One of the major risks that contributes to the suffering of individuals is the local authorities. Very limited ability to enforce laws against debt bondage, child labor, and sexual assault. It's amazing, isn't it? I mean, would you know when you purchase a phone which is using a battery that there could be a story of violence behind almost every single part that goes into it, but most importantly, the battery? A study from a Catholic NGO, the Good Shepherd International Foundation, highlights that some 40,000 children work in the cobalt mines, and close to 80% of the interviewed women have been forced into sexual acts for over a 12-month period. My convenience is underwritten by 40,000 children working in cobalt mines and exposing countless women to sexual assault. Surely, this is a clear and urgent call to action. My phone cannot be the source of so much suffering. Unfortunately, in Canada anyway, it is very hard to know for sure. While many countries like Australia, the United States, France, and the United Kingdom have taken actions that requires transparency in the supply chains of companies which operates in their countries, Canada is quite noticeably absent in this space, making it very hard to know for sure if the shrimp, the electronics, clothing, building materials, flowers, rice, I mean, the list is endless. We don't know if pretty much anything that we consume is free and not tainted with modern slavery. You want to know how to not have this collision of the worlds I've been talking about? Ignore it. It seems that right now, we in Canada are happy to ignore the brutal reality of slavery. However, knowledge leads to action. Nothing happens just because we are aware of modern day slavery, but nothing ever will happen until we are, said Gary Hogan, founder and CEO of IGM. I'm completely aligned with it. There was a season I was clueless about it. But now that we know, the question is, will we end it? Will we let our government know that we cannot be complicit in this violence through inaction? The likelihood is high that everyone listening has, at one point or other, inadvertently supported supply chains tainted with slavery. And if you're being honest, it's not your fault. You didn't know the different steps in the supply chain of how the product got to you. Well, there is currently a bill called the End Modern Day Slavery Act that has been brought to the Canadian Senate for debate on the 29th of October. It is the third time that a form of this bill has been proposed in the last 2 years in Canada. This act requires companies to publicly report on the measures they are taking to prevent and reduce forced labor in their supply chains while holding them accountable to transparency. This was first introduced in 2018. The most recent versions continues to be further improved. I urge all parliamentarians, civil society, organizations, and citizens of this incredible country to give their support to the End Modern Slavery Act, and to continue to advocate that the Canadian government make the fight to end modern slavery their highest priority. Get on that phone with your local MP and demand that this bill sees the light of day. You may ask, why is that important, Anu? Why is something like this so important? Why should you take time out of your day to call your member of parliament? I'm glad you asked. There are similar laws in other countries around the world, such as the United Kingdom and Australia. But in regard to modern day slavery, we are simply behind. As Canadians, we have an identity to protect the underdog and protect those who can't stand up for themselves. And right now, we are complicit in our nation's inaction, our inaction. What do laws like this do? Of what relevance are they? Laws like this get other companies involved. And when there is an intersection of corporations and government working together to enact change, the degree of change is incomprehensible. What is interesting about this law in particular is that it creates a space so that informed consumers can make decisions on internal motivation, not just on the price or the marketing pitch that is presented to them. The closer we can get to allowing people to making decisions based on the virtues and the intrinsic motivations they have internally, the more we can mainstream the idea of ending modern slavery as a personal issue that people care about deeply through everyday decisions, as opposed to something that is merely done as a virtue signal or by simply supporting charities or posting online. The more we can get to the everyday experience of people understanding the deeply interconnected nature that we in Canada enjoy, which causes people to be exposed to slavery around the world, the closer we can get to people deeply understanding their role in actually ending it. And it is possible. It is possible to end slavery, but then will we let the companies we buy products from know that we demand a transparent supply chain? Most importantly, will we realize that we need to work with and fund initiatives that gives the rest of the world the same baseline assumption that we enjoy? A reliable public justice system, so that the personal security is not a privilege that we get to enjoy, but something that is simply fundamentally true for all people. I do hope so. So that we can buy our goods in full confidence, knowing that it wasn't at someone else's expense somewhere in the supply chain. I hope that we can eliminate slavery and violence together. And in our lifetime, right now, it is possible. Thank you. If you'd love to be added to our email updates or request a speaker for your next lunch and learn, please do feel free to email me. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. Namaste.
Uh, wow, I don't even know what to say. It was such an incredibly powerful talk. Thank you, Anu. Thank you so much. So much that stands out from that, and I can see that there's many people reacting to it in the chat. Please keep your comments and questions coming because we're going to get to them in a moment. But I just want to, I guess I just want to bring forward a couple of key messages that really stood out for me personally. I mean, I think that one line, and you know, I see Franco in the comments that it resonated with you too. You know, about women and girls being tortured in order to produce your shirt. I mean, think about that for a moment. That is just heartbreaking. And coupled with the other really staggering statistic that Anu shared with us, about 14 million people, or sorry, 40 million people living in slavery today, more than at any other time in history. I mean, I think of my own culture where, you know, we celebrate during Passover each year the liberation of slaves, you know, 400 years ago. And, you know, this is still an issue we are battling today. And we're all in this fight. We all should be. And so, yeah, how can we know for sure that we are doing no harm in the simple choices that we're making on a daily basis? I think that Anu really challenged us with that today. I think she's given us some really tangible things to take forward, including championing the End of Modern Slavery Act, which I think is a really great call to action. I also want to give a bit of a shout out to the Canadian Ombudsperson for Responsible Enterprise, which is a new federal government institution that, if you're not already aware of, I encourage you to learn more about, because they're actually calling for feedback on the kind of mandate they should have, and will be a really powerful vehicle for holding Canadian business accountable. I want at this time to invite Phil Calvert, who is IJM's National Development Director and resides right here in Calgary. For anybody that that joined earlier this morning, you might have seen Phil and I kind of getting down with our moves to the music. So him and I kind of bonded over that a little bit there. And Phil, it's been a pleasure to have you here today. Pretty incredible presentation that Anu just shared with us. And I have a question for you, but maybe before I ask you that question, I don't know if you are sort of moved to share anything just before we sort of get into those questions, or do you want to jump right in?
Yeah, thanks for that, Lior. And also thank you for the joint dance party that we had before kind of the curtain was pulled back.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a light moment.
Well, one of the things that I think that is so incredible about the work that IJM does, but also about who Anu is specifically, is that the desire that we have to see this thing of slavery come to an end is not something that we see as our responsibility or our domain exclusively. One of the things that Anu actually did while she was leading the operations in South Asia was she led a partnership with Google, where basically we were kind of giving the playbook away, so to speak, of what we do to local charities and other NGOs that are working in the area in order to create more of a movement around kind of fighting this thing of slavery throughout the country of India. And so I'm really excited about this forum specifically, because I think that it gets to some of the interesting DNA in this area of bringing government and charity and kind of business together in order to see a more kind of hopeful future. And I think that what the stories that Anu shared kind of gets to the real nerve center, or kind of the pain point that's kind of the unspoken thing right at the center of why that matters, is those individuals that are on the margins completely forgotten. And so yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for adding that. I think those are really important comments to add. Let's in the interest of time, just sort of dive into a few questions here. And I, again, for those of you, I see there's some, obviously this has resonated with a lot of you. I see a lot of good comments. Let's get a few more questions in there, but we'll make sure to bring forward the ones that have been asked already. But as sort of the person holding the proverbial microphone, I get to take the privilege of asking the first question. And Phil, if you don't mind, I'd like to know, so Anu talked about the Walmart study and the steps that company is taking. I thought that was particularly interesting. And I saw that, I think it was Angie put a link in the comments where you could read a bit more about that Walmart study. So I encourage you to do that. But Walmart's a big company. They have a lot of influence over their own global supply chain. I know they're doing a really good job of pushing their suppliers to do so much more. But if you're a small SME, if you're a small, medium-sized enterprise, whether you're in the garment business or whether you're in another kind of industry that relies on a global supply chain, if you're a small player in that supply chain, how can you have an influence knowing that you have fewer resources to maneuver through this complex global supply chain?
Yeah, it's a really, really great question. And I think that so much of the way that we think as people is based around analogies, right? And so I often like to pull on those a little bit because I think it helps to kind of guide the conversation. There's a very famous saying of how do you eat an elephant, right? It's one bite at a time. And to think that an SME is going to be able to solve the problem of slavery it's not true. But what we can do is to compare it to kind of the movement around having a more kind of environmentally friendly way of approaching business, right? There's small things that every single company can do to reduce their carbon footprint. And you don't need to be a Walmart and reinvent how you ship goods around the world in shipping containers in order to do that. But there are small, very tangible, very kind of interesting things that can be done to help to lead the conversation locally. Because really what it's going to take in order for slavery to be defeated is for people from every single walk of life to wake up to the issue and to start taking incremental steps. And so the more that we can have SMEs leading the conversation around just making sure that people are aware and taking the small steps that can be done to make sure that there is an equitable future just around the corner. And so it could be simple things like going through policies and making sure that, if there are things that are already in place, just to let people know. So that when someone goes and says, well, I want to buy a shirt here, but this one is quite actually active about telling the story of why they have a safe supply chain, or their policies are quite strong around making sure that people aren't being harmed kind of upstream in their supply chain, and they hold their suppliers accountable already. But because there's no mandatory reporting, just taking that leadership posture of saying, well, we're already doing it. And it can literally lead decision purchases or decisions around purchasing. Like one example is my watch, right? I have like so many people, like to track how I go running or whatever. And I chose specifically to get a Garmin watch because they have some really robust policies in place that they talk about on their website. It's a simple thing that they can do. And I know they're a large company, but there's those types of things for someone like me drove why I wanted to buy there. And so I think that the more we can kind of collectively as a society, including small and medium enterprises, take that leadership posture, it eventually will lead the bigger players, kind of that whole idea of leading from the bottom, right? It'll lead the bigger players to take more significant actions.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for addressing that. That's a a really big one, and there might be business owners that are joining us today that are trying to think through that challenge. So I'm really glad that you addressed that. There's a couple of other good questions here in the chat that I'd like to bring forward. Yeah, so one of them is right here on the screen.
Yeah.
Thank you. And this is this is a really big one, right? Because this touches on that issue of there's extremely low price from these sort of bulk buyers of goods, and people enjoy their $8 t-shirt or their sort of low cost trinket that they might buy at like sort of a dollar store, not to pick on the dollar store, but shops like that. And affordability is a big topic, right? So this question, I think, from Bridget comes, back to the idea that for Canadians living in poverty, how can they make responsible buying decisions that are ethical and sustainable, but, still, kind of living with that affordability reality that has really driven the market for these low-cost goods that aren't, looking at transparency and auditing their supply chain and other issues?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've thought a lot about this, and kind of two things come to mind. Number one, whatever their kind of stigma is around reusing stuff or buying from a thrift store or consignment, all those kinds of things, I think that those kinds of stigmas just need to go away. It's okay that and people that are not living in poverty need to lead that, because you can't kind of expect people that are on the margins to be leading what has to happen in order for the world to become a better place, right? And so someone like myself who's not living in poverty, buying a shirt from a consignment store is a very small step towards changing kind of that market that you talked about, right? So if more and more of us are starting to demand that, we're not going to just do the easy thing, right? That more and more of us can stand up and say, well, I'm going to buy used, or I'm going to go to consignment, or if I have the money, I'm going to buy that kind of ethically sourced thing that's marketed at a higher price. And so it's about changing the equation and changing the rules in which you're forced to play in. And we as a collective have the ability to do that, but we have to act as a collective in order to do that.
Yeah, great point. As somebody that's proudly sporting a retro jacket today myself, I definitely subscribe to that philosophy. I know that we're a bit short on time. Do we have time for one more quick question? Yes, good. So here's a really interesting one that this issue of global poverty being decreased in the past century, but how much of that relates to an increase in quality of life? How much actually comes from getting paid, approximately $7 and suffering? So yeah, so this is well, let me invite you to answer it just as it is.
Yeah, there's a couple things there. Number one, all these kind of stats around the reduction of poverty, if you account for inflation, is a different scenario. So one thing that I would invite everybody to do is to go and look up the TED Talk by Gary Haugen called.
Can you spell Haugen?
Yeah, it's Haugen. And so the name of the talk is The Hidden Reason for Poverty That the World Needs to Address Now. And in there, what he talks about is, so Gary's the founder of IJM. And in there, what he talks about is that we can celebrate all the success that we've had around reducing poverty, because it's been a major point of focus for kind of philanthropy around the world for decades now. But if you simply adjust for inflation, what you find is that basically the same percentage of people, when that whole idea was started, are still living below this extreme poverty line. And what really inhibits this from happening, of getting to where we need to be or where we want to go, is this kind of hidden ingredient of not taking justice systems seriously, or thinking that overcoming corruption is too hard. And so that's one thing. The second thing is this kind of idea that people are at least getting paid something, but it's better than nothing. I had the opportunity to visit some of our work in India a couple years ago, and I was talking to a person that was recently freed from slavery, and her comment to me was, because I asked that question, that comes up from time to time here in Canada, and I asked her, she's like, you know what the biggest difference is? I get to choose when I wake up. Yeah. Simply. And so it's not just about the money, it's about everything else that defines who we are as people. And so quality of life is a massive part of that, and also just basic rights.
Yeah, man, that's a powerful note to end on. I mean, that makes me think of like the issue of dignity, right? It's like just having that choice of how you want to start your day. That's huge. Obviously, like, people are sort of getting in the groove now because the questions are coming, and so that's great. Don't stop that momentum, because Phil's going to stick around, right, Phil? And so if you have more questions for Phil, then please reach out to him at the IGM exhibit. So you just use the exhibit tab at the top of your screen there, and Phil will stick around to answer more of your questions. And as you can see, like, this is a big topic, and there's lots of dimensions to it. So let's keep that conversation going. Phil, thank you so much for joining us today. Please also share with Anu just how well received her talk was, and we're really blessed to have both of you joining us for the Soul and Next Economy Forum. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'll be back afterwards with some more instruction about what's next. But at this moment, I'm going to actually pass the baton back to your Master of Ceremonies, Phil, aka Phil the Thrill Lozano, who has a special Be Local feature to share with you. So you'll see me again. So this isn't goodbye, but Phil, please take it away. Yeah, so we're having some technical difficulties, as you can probably tell. But hey, this is how this is how we roll. We just kind of adapt. So what you're watching here is a really great video from a local business, as you can see on the screen there, Mandy Patchen from Glass House Experience. And when we talk about the soul of the next economy, we often think of all the big businesses and tech companies that are capturing headlines. The Apples and Ubers of the world, the Googles. But when it comes to the soul of the existing economy, we often overlook small business. And what percentage of Calgary's total businesses are small businesses? And so small business defined as less than 50 employees. Take a guess. Type it in the chat, okay? And a breakdown of Calgary's small businesses by small businesses in Calgary, they account for, drum roll, have we got some guesses in there? Okay. I see 90%, 77%. Yeah, so 90% is pretty darn close, because it actually counts for 95.1%. So more than 95% of Calgary's total businesses are small businesses less than 50 employees. Like, how local can you get, right? A breakdown of Calgary's small businesses by employee size demonstrates that the smallest segment, 1 to 4 employees, is in fact the largest. So when we think of the soul of the existing economy or the next economy, it wouldn't be crazy to think of small business. And on that note, let's give you an insight into the lives of small business owners, unfiltered, unpolished. In fact, this video is unedited. I see Phil is joining us. Phil, can you give us a bit more context about what we're watching on the screen here?
Amazing. My man in blue, Leo, thank you for covering for me. I told you we were going to have some glitches, and we came across some glitches.
It's teamwork here. This is how we roll. Teamwork.
Amazing.
Teamwork makes the dream work, right?
You got it. So yeah, my internet connection just completely shut down. So thank you, Leo. You had my back. I love this. So as Leo mentioned, small business, like a lot of people think of like all these big, huge businesses, like in terms of the soul of the next economy. But at the end of the day, it's small business that makes up 95% of Calgary's total businesses. And so when the other Philip was talking about be aware, be intentional of how you spend your money, be aware of where your money is going and the impacts of your money and investing in those businesses. One way to be 100% sure about what's going on with their dollars is to actually be familiar with a business. And it's easy to be familiar with a business if they're in your backyard. And so this video is of a local entrepreneur. Her name is Mandy, as Leo had mentioned. She's actually a member of the Be Local Network. And the Be Local Network is actually a network of local businesses that are community focused. You can find out more about the Glass House Experience. I'm going to get my team to put their business description in the chat as well. I'm going to do a quick shameless plug for all Soul Forum attendees. You can get 10% off everything on Be Local's online store, including some amazing wine glasses that Mandy makes here in Calgary. And so again, everything on the Be Local store are by Be Local members, businesses that are committed to doing good in community, and Mandy is one of them. And so these videos that we'll be playing throughout the forum are a way, like a behind the curtain sneak peek into some of the local businesses in Calgary that are the heart and blood of the economy. And so by kind of like having these unedited raw videos, it's not a commercial. It's just to show you that, entrepreneurialism isn't always sexy. It can often be a grind. And this is what's kind of happening to make all this magic happen behind the scenes. And so keep your eyes peeled for some of these breaks in the future, these video breaks, these Be Local features, and we'll be profiling various Be Local members throughout the forum. Again, thank you, Leo, for covering me on that one. I appreciate it. I'll hand things back over to you, my friend.
Feel the thrill, everybody. Yes. that was great. That was awesome, and I'm so glad that we get to celebrate the small businesses in our community. Super important, like like we're saying, right? This is actually the majority of our economy. So it's great to talk about the household names that we know about and ask the questions. What are they doing? But really, we could be asking that question for every single purchase with every single company, just letting people know that we're interested, that we're paying attention. Local businesses are there to meet the demand, to meet the need, and especially right now, right during COVID-19, local businesses need us. So this is the time to support our favorite local businesses. Now let's switch gears for a second, because we have such a treat for you coming up here. We have 4 leaders from 4 terrific companies with us. And so, yes, some of the big, iconic Canadian companies like Canadian Tire. Chandos Construction is another amazing company that you might have heard of, and some smaller ones that perhaps are newer to you, but Rise Consulting, really incredible organization. As you can see here, we'll be talking about Indigenous inclusion through social procurement, plus Hope Cleaning, changing lives through hiring and purchasing. Each of these leaders is ready to talk to you about the specific supply chain practices that are noted on this slide here. And so really getting into the nitty gritty. How does it work? And speaking of how it works, this is how this will work. You choose the company you want to learn more about by clicking on one of the links below in Swap Card. Okay, you'll have 20 minutes. The discussion will be moderated, but you may have an opportunity to ask direct questions as well. So then after the first 20 minutes, come back here to Swap Card and select another roundtable and join that for another 20 minutes, okay? After the second 20-minute session, come back here again and join me. We'll take a break together. It'll be a really fun break, so sure, do the bio break stuff if you need to at that time, but stick around because there's some fun things planned for that as well. And don't worry, the roundtable moderators will remind you and give you instructions along the way here, okay? So let's begin. The first roundtable session, just click on the colored tab below. I will see you there.